The air was already heavy before the smoke rolled in. You could feel it, thick, charged, like the building itself knew something was wrong. Somewhere far above, metal screamed against metal, the sound sharp enough to slice right through your thoughts. And in the middle of that chaos, one voice carried above all others. Keep moving. Eyes forward, don't stop. The voice belonged to a man in his 60s, tall, broad-shouldered, his jaw set like granite. His name was Rick Rescorla, and in this moment, he wasn't just the head of security, he was the lifeline for hundreds of terrified people. The stairwell smelled of dust and hot concrete, the kind of dry, choking scent that catches in your throat. Emergency lights flickered, throwing jagged shadows across the faces of the evacuees. Some were crying, some silent in shock, others whispering frantic prayers under their breath. But Rick was steady. Every few steps, he'd turn his head just enough to make eye contact with someone, a silent reminder. I'm here, you're safe, keep going. He didn't walk with them. He led them, moving just fast enough to set the pace, but slow enough to keep the group together. And when fear began to ripple through the crowd, he didn't raise his voice in panic. Instead, he sang. It was a song from his childhood, a Cornish marching tune, its melody firm and unwavering, cutting through the smoke and fear like a lighthouse beam through a storm. The words didn't matter, the rhythm did. Step, step, step. The beat of survival. Somewhere deep in his mind, decades of military training were firing in sequence. Check for stragglers. Control the tempo. Never let the group splinter. And as he glanced over his shoulder, seeing the faces of the people he'd sworn to protect, his expression hardened with resolve. They were going to make it, no matter what it cost him. Chapter 1. Long before the skyscrapers, before the uniform and the battlefield, there was the sea. Cornwall's coast is not the gentle, postcard England you might imagine. Here, the wind bites, salted and cold, and the ocean pounds against jagged cliffs with a sound like distant cannon fire. The air tastes of brine, the gulls scream overhead, and the fishing boats rock against their moorings as if impatient to be free. It was in this rugged corner of the world, in the small port town of Hale, that Cyril Richard Rescorla, Rick, to everyone who knew him, took his first breaths. Born in 1939, the world he entered was already tilting toward war. By the time Rick could walk, British soldiers were a common sight in the streets. But it wasn't until 1944, in the final push toward victory in Europe, that something happened which burned itself into young Rick's mind forever. The Americans arrived. The quiet lanes of Hale came alive with the rumble of trucks and the clatter of boots on cobblestones. Tall men in unfamiliar uniforms filled the pubs, swapped cigarettes for stories, and handed out sticks of chewing gum to grinning kids. They laughed loud, they carried themselves with an easy confidence, and their accents sounded like something from the movies. Rick, barely 5 years old, would hide behind the stone wall near his home just to watch them march. There was something magnetic about them, their sense of purpose, the way they moved as one. It was the first spark of a dream. One day, I'll be like them. In the years that followed, Cornwall gave him an education in resilience. The storms that rolled in from the Atlantic were merciless, tearing at roofs and flooding streets. The work was hard, whether in the fields, on the boats, or in the factories, and everyone pulled their weight. Rick learned early that complaining never changed the weather. You simply put your head down and pushed through. That attitude would follow him into every chapter of his life. Chapter 2. School. By the time Rick was in his teens, that childhood fascination with soldiers had hardened into a plan. He wasn't going to just watch history happen, he was going to be part of it. School gave him the basics, but Cornwall itself was his true classroom. Running the cliffside paths built stamina in his legs and lungs. Hauling heavy fishing nets alongside the older men gave him strength in his arms. And long hours staring out at the horizon taught him patience, the kind that makes you wait for your moment and then seize it without hesitation. So, when he came of age, Rick didn't linger. He joined the British Army, specifically the Parachute Regiment, one of the most demanding and respected branches in the service. The training was relentless. Paratroopers weren't just soldiers, they were elite, expected to drop into hostile territory from the sky and operate behind enemy lines. The days began before sunrise and ended only when the instructors decided they were over. Push-ups in the mud, sprints with full gear, long marches through rain so cold it numbed your bones. And then there were the jumps. The stomach-lurching moment when the ground fell away, the wind roared in your ears, and you had just seconds to trust your parachute. Rick thrived. The discipline, the brotherhood, the physical and mental challenge, it all suited him. And perhaps most importantly, the uniform gave him a sense of identity. He wasn't just a boy from Hale anymore, he was part of something bigger. Chapter 3. But Rick was never one to sit still for long. After serving in the parachute regiment, he sought out new challenges, and they took him far from England's green fields. He went to Rhodesia, modern-day Zimbabwe, where he joined the police force. It was a different kind of service, in a different kind of world. The sun was harsher here, the air dry and dusty, and the political climate tense. Colonial Africa in the 1960s was a place of shifting loyalties and constant undercurrents of conflict. Patrolling in Rhodesia meant long hours under a blazing sky, scanning the bush for threats that could emerge without warning. It taught Rick adaptability, how to read a situation before it exploded, how to handle both the danger and the diplomacy that the job required. Yet even in Africa, the memory of those American soldiers from his childhood never quite left him. They had come to his home to fight for freedom. Maybe now it was his turn to stand alongside them. Chapter 4. Life in the Army. In 1963, Rick made a decision that would change the trajectory of his life. He moved to the United States, enlisted in the U.S. Army, and was assigned to the 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry Regiment, the very same unit that General Custer had led at the Battle of the Little Bighorn, nearly a century before. It was a unit with a proud, storied, and sometimes tragic history. Training in the U.S. was no easier than in Britain. If anything, it was more intense. But Rick carried himself with a quiet confidence, the kind that came from already having been tested in other uniforms, on other continents. His accent set him apart, but his skill earned him respect. And soon, the place where all that training would matter arrived: Vietnam. The air was already thick with smoke. Somewhere far above, metal screamed, a sound like the groaning of a dying giant. Rick's shirt clung to him with sweat, but his voice was steady, cutting through the chaos. Keep moving. Don't stop. The stairwell was a river of people now, each one clutching the rail, eyes wide with terror. The building trembled again. Somewhere behind them, glass shattered, a sharp crack swallowed quickly by the low, rolling roar of the fire above. Rick didn't flinch. He moved like a man who had been here before, not in this building, not in this disaster, but in the chaos of fear itself. His mind flicked through evacuation routes, contingency plans, just as it once had through battlefield maps and enemy positions. Stay together. Almost there, he called out, his hand brushing each shoulder as he passed, making sure no one slipped behind. For a heartbeat, he thought of Cornwall's wind-battered cliffs. For another, of a humid jungle half a world away. The war had taught him how to keep men moving when their legs wanted to stop. It had taught him how to pull order from panic. And now, it was teaching him how to save them all. Chapter 5. Vietnam. The year was 1965, and the heat in Vietnam was not like anything Rick had felt before. It was a wet, suffocating blanket that clung to the skin and made the air taste of rot and gunpowder. The 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry had been dropped into the Ia Drang Valley, a place that would soon become infamous in military history. They weren't just walking into a fight. They were walking into the first major battle between U.S. forces and the North Vietnamese army. When the first shots cracked through the tree line, the jungle seemed to explode into life. Leaves shredded by bullets drifted down like green rain. Men shouted over the pounding of M60 machine guns. Somewhere ahead, a grenade went off, the shockwave rattling through the undergrowth. Rick didn't hang back. He moved forward, weaving between his men, barking orders, steadying hands that trembled, pulling wounded soldiers to cover. Bullets slapped into the dirt around him, but his focus never wavered. Years later, survivors of that battle would say the same thing. Rescorla was everywhere. Checking ammo, redirecting fire, cracking jokes in the middle of the firefight to keep men from freezing up. His voice became a constant in the chaos, and in a place where seconds could mean life or death, that constancy was everything. Chapter 6. The Battle of Ia Drang, November 1965. The jungle was alive, not with birdsong or the rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze, but with the deadly chatter of gunfire and the thudding roar of helicopters overhead. The Battle of Ia Drang was a brutal test of nerve and skill. Rick's battalion had been surrounded, cut off, and outnumbered. Yet they fought on with a ferocity born of desperation and training. Rick moved among the wounded, helping to stabilize them, calling in artillery strikes, and always pushing his men to hold the line. His leadership wasn't just about tactics, it was about heart. He believed every life mattered. Even in the darkest moments, he kept his men moving forward, because standing still meant death. The fight dragged on for days, and when it finally ended, the valley was littered with the cost of war. Rick's battalion had survived, but only just. The battle left scars deeper than any wound, and the memory of friends lost haunted every step. For Rick, it was a crucible. It shaped him, hardened him, and set the stage for the next chapter of his life, one far removed from the jungle, yet just as dangerous. Chapter 7. Before 9/11. After Vietnam, Rick didn't settle. The battlefield had taught him many things, about courage, about sacrifice, but it had also shown him the fragility of life. When he left active duty, he found work in the private sector in security consulting. And then, in 1985, fate brought him to New York City. The World Trade Center stood like twin beacons of ambition, piercing the skyline with their gleaming steel and glass. Rick was hired by Morgan Stanley Dean Witter to oversee their emergency preparedness. His job was simple in theory: create evacuation plans, train staff, and ensure that if disaster struck, everyone would know exactly what to do. But Rick took the job as seriously as any mission in Vietnam. He drilled employees constantly, demanding they know every stairwell, every exit, every procedure by heart. Many grumbled at first, but Rick was relentless. He believed it wasn't just about policy, it was about saving lives. His experience gave him a unique perspective. He wasn't just planning for fires or earthquakes, he was preparing for chaos, panic, and human behavior under stress. And when the unthinkable happened on September 11, 2001, that preparation was tested like never before. Chapter 8. 9/11. The morning started like any other. Clear skies, the hum of the city waking up. But then the first plane hit. The impact was a violent shock that rattled windows blocks away. Rick was already on site, and immediately his training kicked in. He moved through the Morgan Stanley floors, directing evacuations with a calm voice that belied the terror around him. When the second plane struck, it confirmed the nightmare. This was no accident. It was an attack. Rick kept singing. His marching song was a beacon for the employees, a steady drumbeat in a sea of confusion. Floor by floor, stairwell by stairwell, he guided hundreds down the tower. His final radio call was a steady update on progress, his voice never faltering. But then the building began to crumble. Rick chose to stay behind, ensuring as many people as possible made it out. He never left his post. The towers fell, and with them, the man who had led so many to safety. Rick Rescorla died a hero, his courage a testament to a life lived on the front lines of danger and hope. Thanks everyone for watching. Please consider subscribing to the channel, and see you soon.